Hello and welcome back to the second episode of our series for CI 492. We had just talked about the K-12 project, and now we're going to focus on the rubric for that project. So just a little quick recap on the project. It is a reading journal in which 9th grade students in an English classroom will keep track of what they have read, taking notes on it, jotting down key points, key characters, page numbers if they want, and then also summarizing each chapter at the end of the chapter. So these journals are really helpful for students because they can be used on exams and quizzes and projects and even homework assignments. So there's motivation for them to do a thorough job and to write a good summary. I didn't really talk too much about how these assignments would be graded, though. I talked about what I wanted students to take out of it. My learning objectives are students will be able to think critically, students will be able to learn how to take notes, and students will be able to understand their notes. So being able to go back, find certain passages if they're on a quiz, taking an exam, if they're doing a project and they need certain quotes, or if they just need to jog their memory on what they read that day, they will have a summary that they came up with themselves, that they didn't plagiarize, so it will help them to remember and actually understand what they read. So, to begin, let's talk about what's on the rubric. We look here. There's 3 main goals of the rubric, and I'm just going to go through and read them for you. So the first goal is purpose/intent. This is worth 1 point, and to earn full credit for this part of the rubric, the student clearly understood the intent for completing this assignment. There is genuine thought put into the completion of notes. And then so on and so forth. If they did adequate for this part of the assignment, they may not have understood the intent, and there is some thought. And if they did not understand the assignment, students seem to misunderstand the intent, and there's little thought put into the completion of notes. Now, each of my elements of the rubric correlate with one or more of the learning objectives. So purpose and intent directly correlates with how to take notes. So if they're intentionally taking notes, if they're trying hard, that would get them their full point. But if they're not sure, maybe they just haven't learned how to yet, that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're working towards learning. That wouldn't be full credit. This also goes along with how to understand their notes. So if they're just writing down random things, they're not going to be able to go back and use them if they don't know how to find what they've written down. This is why it's important to have purpose, have an intent for what you're doing, for what the students are writing, and that will go along with our learning objectives of learning how to take notes and learning how to understand them. So then the next part on our rubric is critical thinking. This is worth 3 points. It's worth the most. And that's because critical thinking is one of our learning objectives. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the perfect score for critical thinking. Student went beyond the surface level of understanding, and it is clear that they thought about what they were writing. It seems pretty basic, but it also goes along with learning how to take notes, learning how to organize their notes, learning how to go back through and find bits and pieces of information that they remember writing. This part of the rubric also directly goes along with summarizing. So when students read a chapter and they don't just move right on to the next chapter, they have to write down a summary. It helps their brains to be able to pull thought. What did I actually just read? Maybe they have to go back through the chapter and say, okay, this happened, and this happened. Those were the big 3 or 4 parts of this chapter. And then they just write like a little short paragraph of 2 to 3 sentences telling themselves, their future selves, what this chapter was about. And I think that really goes along with the critical thinking, because they can't plagiarize this. They shouldn't plagiarize this. I'll know what summaries look like for the text that we're reading. And obviously we can't plagiarize whenever we're doing an assignment like this for credit. All right, and then to have not full credit for this part of the rubric, the next one is student occasionally went beyond the surface level, and then it is somewhat unclear that they thought about what they were writing. And then no credit or little credit would be student didn't go beyond the surface level, and it is unclear that they thought about what they were writing. So this is why critical thinking and going through more than one just reading, not full reading of the chapter, but when they finish a chapter saying, okay, let me summarize that. That was a lot of words, especially for 9th graders. They're still getting into this young adult literature. Some of them haven't read that much before. I know that the book that I was intending for this is The Outsiders. At least that's the one I was thinking of when I wrote this. And I know that a lot of people have said about The Outsiders, it was their first book they ever read front to back. So I think that having this understanding is something that a lot of people haven't done before, or they didn't do for school readings. Maybe they did it for pleasure reading, but not necessarily for a reading that they didn't outwardly find interesting. So by having these summaries, students are thinking deeper and pulling information from their brain that wasn't just words on a page. All right, and then finally, my third point on this rubric is organization. Organization is so important, especially for one of the learning objectives. Learning objective number 3, how to understand their notes. Students need to be able to go back and find key passages, key words. Even if they don't remember completely where it is, their notes should be organized and honestly pretty concise so that they can just flip through a couple pages and find what chapter of The Outsiders did this happen in, or what did I write down for these summaries, that they should be able to go through and read all of their summaries during the exam time, that they'll have enough time to do that. It shouldn't be taking them longer than a couple minutes to read through all of their summaries for a book. So that's the intention there, is that notes will be organized. That's worth 2 points. So overall, the assignment is worth 6 points each week or each time that it is assigned for a group of chapters or a chapter. So what I have written down for full credit here for organization is student clearly labeled their notes with the chapter number, chapter title, if applicable, and date. Notes are readable and easy to follow. So it's very important that students label the chapter number, chapter title, maybe some topics about the chapter, who the characters or the main characters, what their roles were during this chapter, and then key events as well as their summary. I won't be grading these reading journal entries based on, oh, did you forget to mention that this happened? Did you forget to write a more thorough summary? Did you forget to mention that these characters were the ones involved? No. This isn't a hard-cut copy of what I want students to be writing down. It's more of, do you have a summary and do you have some notes taken? Is it clear that you put time and effort into completing this summary? That's the main goal for me for these students, is to just think and write a summary and take some notes about what they read. And I think that's something that's very important for this developmental age, going into high school, starting off their high school career. It's something that they're going to keep using down the line, so it's very important that they're learning how to do it now. Finally, I just want to talk about how I would grade this rubric. I obviously have the points in place, so 1 point, 3 points, and 2 points. But I also have an idea for a system. It's called the check system. So a check plus is like full credit. Student clearly understood the intent for completing the assignment. A regular old check would just be kind of like partial credit. They may not have understood the intent for completing the assignment, so that would just be a check. It's still good. It's just not an A plus or a check plus. And then a check minus would be you're still getting a check. You still did the assignment, but you might have misunderstood the intent for completing this assignment. I like the check system because it's not as overt with the grades. I know that some students, even now, compare their grades of what they got. And I would rather not give a student a 0 out of 6 ever, unless they didn't complete the assignment. But still, even then, a check minus seems a little less harsh. Like, if we keep getting check minuses, we're going to have to talk about it. How can we do better? Why are we struggling? How can we fix this? What can I do as your teacher to help you fix this? And then beside the check system, another idea that I had, I mentioned it in the first portion of the first podcast that I did about the assignment itself. I mentioned collecting the notebooks before a test or exam, and then seeing what's written down, grading. That way students can't write notes in it while they're leading up to the quiz. That way I can see what they've written. If I find cheating, then I find cheating. But by doing this, not only I'd be able to help prevent that, but I also just plan to read through these, give them these grades, give them feedback, specifically direct feedback, so that they know how they can improve, how they can do better, how they can get that check plus, and more importantly, how their notes can help themselves later on down the line when they're doing their exams and their quizzes and their projects. So that's pretty much it for this assignment rubric. Thank you for listening to this part of the podcast. The next episode is going to be all about the interview that I conducted on my 9th grade sister about her 9th grade English class. So very relevant to the topics we're talking about here today. And I hope to see you in the next podcast. Bye.